You're listening to Puma Podcast.
Imagine this. Isa kang OFW na bumalik sa Pilipinas nung pandemic. Nasa airport ka at pabalik ka na sa Kuwait. May ticket ka na, nakapag-coordinate ka rin sa boss mo. Nag-impake ka na at hawak-hawak mo ang overseas employment certificate mo. Nakapila ka na sa NAIA pero bigla ka na lang pinauwi kasi na-defer ang iyong working visa. I'm Franco Luna, Puma Podcast, and you're listening to Teka Teka News. In this episode, we talk about the diplomatic standoff with Kuwait that has overseas Filipino workers caught in the middle.
Yung sa amin lang, may naintindihan naman namin na nagkagastos din, no? Yung mga workers na palipad na sana. Kaya naisipan namin na bigyan din ng financial aid kasi hindi naman nila kasalanan at lalong hindi kasalanan ng pamilya nila na nangyari ito.
That's Migrant Workers Secretary Toots Ople at a press briefing May 19th. According to the DMW, that was actually the experience of 815 OFWs whose travel to Kuwait was deferred.
I think what is important is that we stand by and support our workers who are affected by the visa suspension. Kaya nga inuuna namin itong 815, ano? Siyempre, umaasa na yung mga pamilya niyan kasi may mga workers na ang mas gusto ay hintayin kung ano yung magaganap dahil may iba sa kanila talagang gusto magtrabaho sa Kuwait. These are all personal decisions.
The Kuwait government decided to suspend the issuance of new entry visas for Filipinos. Starting May 10, only Filipinos with valid resident visas are allowed to enter the Gulf state. Tensions between the two countries have been brewing for a while because of reports of violence and abuse of OFWs in Kuwait.
Oh, how come my countrymen are now suffering brutality, cruelty, and death? And you seem to be oblivious about it. We've been complaining. Is there something wrong with your culture? Is there something wrong with the values? Potang ina prinansya yung katawan.
That was former President Rodrigo Duterte. He said that 5 years ago, in the wake of the death of Joanna Daniela de Mafelis, she was found stuffed in a freezer in Kuwait. In response, the government blocked the deployment of first-time household service workers in Kuwait. It was for their safety, they said, and there have been more since then. There's also Ginalyn Villavende, a 29-year-old domestic worker who died on February 6, 2022, after she was allegedly strangled by her employer. According to Kuwait media, more than 114 Filipino maids left Kuwait in less than 4 days after the brutal killing of another OFW, Julie B. Renada. She was killed by a 17-year-old boy who reportedly raped and burnt her. Pero hindi lang noong panahon ni Duterte. Marami na ring similar incidents before.
The thing is, pag may tension ng ganyan, policy, tsaka syempre very vivid pa, bagong-bago pa rin yung images nila Jubilee. And not to mention na meron ka pa rin, 2019 December, tsaka sila Di Mafelis.
That's Ellen Sana. She's Executive Director of the Center for Migrant Advocacy.
Siyempre, on the part of yung mga nandoon pa rin, either magkaroon ng defensive attitude yung komunidad ng Kuwaiti sa Kuwait at parang maging worry sila na ito bang mga Pinoy, baka maging defensive. So, hindi necessarily they will be stopped to go back to Kuwait, pero yung atmosphere may not be so friendly. You know, for even for those who are already in Kuwait. Because of the tension between the two countries. And of course, very, very real is the fact that we have domestic workers na hindi lang literally na may violation ng contract na hindi napasweldo, pero sobra yung nangyaring pagkapatay. Very bad.
Philippine officials see the ban as a response to Manila's move in February to stop first-time household service workers from going into the emirate. Here's Foreign Affairs Undersecretary Eduardo de Vega at a recent House hearing.
I don't want to use the word retaliation kasi we don't want to use provocative words. Let's just say that obviously this is their response. A message being sent by Kuwait that they want us to lift the ban as soon as possible. Parang sinasabi nila, okay, ayaw nyo sa amin, ayaw nyo magpadala ng kasambahay, wag na kayo magpadala ng kahit anong mga manggagawa.
Pero hindi lang domestic workers ang natamaan ng ban. Pati na rin ang mga nasa healthcare sector at hotel and restaurant sector. Here's Migrant Workers Secretary Tuts Ople.
From January to April of this year, Migrant Workers Office in Kuwait approved 2,849 job orders. So out of these 2,849 job orders, yung processing ng contracts are at various stages. So actually, hindi pa sila nakaschedule talaga umalis, but they are considered as active applicants. So based on data provided by our Migrant Workers Office in Kuwait, out of these 2,849, around 418 belong to the healthcare industry, mostly nurses. And the next highest category would be in the hotel and restaurant sector as waiters and waitresses.
It's worth mentioning that last year there were around 47,000 overseas household service workers who went to Kuwait. So now think about how messy this diplomatic standoff is. It's a deployment ban on our part, tapos may huminto na rin yung issuance of visas to Filipinos in Kuwait. At sa dulo nun, ang naiipit talaga dito ay ang OFWs natin. Caught in the crossfire talaga sila, at ang dami nang naipit.
For the other categories of workers, they may have paid yung kanilang recruitment fees, at least equivalent of 1 month's salary, tapos yung kanila pang ibang mga, kung taga-probinsya pa yan, lumuwas na ng Maynila to prepare yung iba pang mga dokumento. It costs. So bumabagsak na yung metro mo, and then suddenly, hindi ka makakaalis. So paano mo babawiin yung iyong mga ginastos at saka yung in-anticipate mo, umutang ka na kasi nga ina-anticipate mo na babawi ka naman kasi you will get your salary, etc. Then suddenly hindi ganon yung naging resulta.
There's a real financial cost to that. Most OFWs have had to pay recruitment fees too on top of their plane tickets. Usually those amount to 1 month of their salary once they start working. On the ground, Filipinos in Kuwait are also beginning to feel the tension between the governments in a very concrete way. Take note that's around 252,000 Filipinos who work in Kuwait. Many of them are maids. Ellen says that if anything, the ban has highlighted the need for both governments to take steps to protect Filipino workers in Kuwait. But migrant workers groups say they don't see that sense of urgency just yet. Here's Ellen again.
Based on the reports, yung conclusion nila ay wala namang malinaw if they have arrived at a decision. Very diplomatic yung lingwahe na parang pag binasa mo, okay. So, what now? So, parang nabitin ka. So, wala kasing course of action. Yun naman yung problema. Meron kang redress mechanism for money claims and all that. Pero it may take time. Magpa-file ka at kung taga-probinsya ka pa, di meron ka pa rin mga gastos sa pag-follow up, pagpapa-xerox ng mga dokumento mo, etc.
None of this is to say that there aren't very real problems that OFWs in the Middle East are facing. Gulf countries like Kuwait have faced criticism in the past over its kafala system for foreign workers. It's been likened to a form of bonded labor or even slavery. Pero ngayon kasi, parang medyo kontra talaga dun sa kasabihan na we give the world our best, di ba?
Yung heinous crime talaga yung as it is described, yung case ni Jubilee. Diba? So parang hindi mo yun pwedeng pagtatakpan or i-mellow lang, i-water down yung description na yun. Kasi it's really very bad that even the Kuwaiti authorities had to issue apologies kasi parang unimaginable in this time and age.
We're pausing for a quick break now. When we return, we'll tell you about the diplomatic consequences of this standoff.
Ang tingin ko po, ang sagot natin is just like the way we protect our national territory, our economic interests, our cultural values, we'll always resolve things through diplomacy, but not at the expense of the national pride and honor. Now, after all, safety and welfare din ng ating mga kababayan yan.
That's DFA Undersecretary Ed De Vega again. The idea is clear. They're doing this to ensure our OFWs' safety. But what's missing in that statement is that national pride and honor might be what's keeping our kababayans from going back to work. Ellen Sana of the Center for Migrant Advocacy says there are very real diplomatic consequences that can make both sides bleed for as long as we let this drag out.
Very specific na ang trabaho na may deployment ban sa atin ay first-time domestic workers. So hindi siya across the board na occupations. So parang nasobrahan nung, ano yun, retaliation ba yun? Na bumabawi ba yung Kuwait tapos sila rin nag-impose ng ban? Tapos all across the board yung kanilang stoppage ng issuance of visa. Kasi I think even in the past, ang Kuwait kasi ay matagal ng kaugnayan natin pagdating sa, of course, on many issues.
As you may know, Kuwait is a major destination for Filipino workers. In fact, there are over 2 million Filipinos currently living and working in Kuwait. So malamang this affects the economy too. The total value of cash remittances sent by overseas Filipino workers in Kuwait was about $597 million last year. And so far this year, remittances from Kuwait have accounted for around almost 2% of all the money sent home by OFWs. And now this ban is expected to reduce remittances by 35 billion pesos in 2023. Ellen says solving the issue diplomatically helps Kuwait too.
Kulang sila ng manggagawa. So I think we have to remind them of that. So parang mutually beneficial lahat ng nakinabang sa OFWs, di ba? Origin and destination countries. Kaya in these such situations, in these times na naiipit yung workers natin, dapat merong positive intervention. Immediate intervention na gagawin naman yung ating duty bearers. Para kasi they're bearing the brunt of the consequence of their actions. So, of course, they can always say, it's not us, but it's the Kuwaiti. But ano yun? Hindi pwedeng pointing fingers. Ang bottom line mo dyan ay aring ating mga OFWs.
It's still not even clear why the Kuwaiti government suspended these visas in the first place. They cited labor violations in our deal with them, but that was never explained in the meetings between the two sides. Now, the DMW says it's looking into interventions to help these OFWs in the short term.
They're OFWs, and the primary form of assistance is financial assistance to help them yung stem the tide dito sa pinagdadaan ng hindi sila makaalis. No? So we will be providing them in coordination and cooperation with their respective recruitment agencies.
Essentially, una, pangtawid sa expenses nila plus other possible needs nila. But also, tinambalan ito ng employment. Kasi, di ba, mas long-lasting yung employment, mas sustainable for the worker.
That's Migrant Workers Undersecretary Hans Kakdak. Before you ask, that amounts to 30,000 pesos for every Kuwait-bound OFW who already secured an overseas employment certificate. One-time assistance lang yan, ha?
And then, employment assistance sec, magbibigay po tayo ng tulong sa kanila in coordination with their recruitment agencies sa paghahanap ng other available job opportunities that will be co-equal with their skill sets. And we'll be mindful about no potential downgrades as well, though, and other types of benefits.
The Center for Migrant Advocacy has this advice for OFWs who were already paid up.
Meron tayong joint and several liability, pwede yung i-explore. Pero i-revisit natin kailan nagsisimula yung kontrata, yung visa ng kontrata. pagkapirma ba ng worker dito sa Pilipinas bago siya umalis or pagdating niya doon sa kanyang employer. I think that's one of the options na pwedeng tingnan. I-revisit kung may mga kontratang pinirmahan na yung workers natin at hindi naman natuloy yung pag-alis nila. Meron bang pwede silang mahabol sa foreign employer nila, pero malabo yun kung hindi pa sila nakaalis. So, ang pwede nilang habulin yung kanilang recruitment agency if they have recruitment agencies.
At the end of the day, this is all just damage control until both sides find a solution that works for everybody. The most recent statements from either side doesn't indicate the bans will be lifted anytime soon. The worker ban is a complex issue with no easy solutions. It remains to be seen whether the two countries will be able to reach an agreement that satisfies both sides. Here's Ellen again with the final word.
Sana mag-collaborate, mag-ayos, mag-usap itong DMW and the recruitment agencies para i-facilitate yung pag-deploy kung gusto pa rin mag-deploy ng mga workers affected na makapagtrabaho agad-agad. Kasi syempre it will create a lot of tension with the concerned country of destination. Especially kasi pag unilateral yon. So it's like saying to the world na, oh, that country is bad kasi you're not allowing your citizens to go there. So I don't know how it feels now na tayo yung nasa receiving end nung ganong sitwasyon.
And that was today's episode of Teka Teka News. Again, I'm Franco Luna. This episode was edited by Pidoy Blanco. Follow Teka Teka News and Puma Podcast on your favorite podcast app or listen for free on YouTube. Maraming salamat po.